Stephen, meet again, another Bullseye Guy podcast coming to you still in Beverly Hills, a few more days, and then it will become international travel again. And speaking of international, going to interview Fred Moss. He's not really international, but he's far enough up north in California that to me it would seem like a trip to another world. So, Fred, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a quick introduction and actually start with where you're located, because what you just told me was an area I had never even heard of.
Sure. So right now, I thank you for having me on the Bullseye Guy. And you know who I am is I'm Dr. Fred, and I'm the undoctor, and I live up in Grass Valley, California. That's up in Nevada County. It's about 30 miles north of I-80, in between Sacramento and Reno, like an equilateral triangle. It's in the foothills of the west side of the foothills of the High Sierra Mountains. Really, really pretty area. I'm really just honored and blessed to live up in such a beautiful space in California.
Yeah, when you were describing it, it sounds awfully different than the jungle of LA where we are now. So,
Yeah, I left LA. We left LA last July, so I've just been here for about a year, little less. Excuse me, a little less than a year and a half, and we had lived over there and on the edge of Santa Monica and West LA, on like Bundy and Santa Monica, and then we just up and left last July, and so it really is a great little respite.
yeah, perfect. Well, give us a little background and introduction on you and the undoctor nature of what you're doing.
Sure, thank you. So, look, I've been in mental health for a little bit over 40 years, and essentially, really, I'm a college dropout. I dropped out a second time at the University of Michigan in 1980, and my mother got me a job as a child care worker that year, child care worker at a state hospital, and that was only going to be biding time until I figured out what I wanted to do with my life, and I was there for a few weeks thinking I would just gather up enough paychecks to buy myself a car and drive around the country and find out what I was going to do. And then I was there a little bit longer, stayed a few months, and then really got to what I already know, which is that connection, communication, creativity, and conversation. These are the things that really are at the heart of all healing. So I was interacting with my adolescent, patients or my cohort, and really, I really loved it. And the thing I didn't love was the way that psychiatry dealt with these kids. So we would call the psychiatrist and report agitation or insomnia or something, and they would come by, have one word with the child, and then we'd have to hold the kid down while the nurses injected him with medicines. This was so heinous to me that I was just like, well, I got to do something about this. So I decided that I would go back to school and be a psychiatrist and do it right. So I actually went back to school for another 13 years and, got myself my medical degree from the Northwestern University, and then I did my residency in Cincinnati, where I raised my raised my two children, and had a big old practice, a psychiatric practice. And it was around that time that biological psychiatry, on the heels of the initiation or the introduction of Prozac, became a really big thing. And it no longer was psychiatry somewhere where conversation and communication and creativity was a source of healing. Instead, we had this idea that it was biological and that we could treat all misery or all discomforts with medicine as if there was something wrong with being uncomfortable. As it turns out, there's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable at all. It's completely normal. In fact, if you're not uncomfortable right now, you're kind of missing a boat, and there's something to be uncomfortable about. So over time, and really fast forwarding a little bit, in 2006, I began to see that medicines maybe weren't serving the grand purpose that I thought they were. And I started taking people off of medicine when they were ready, sort of lower risk patients, and then a little bit higher risk and a little bit higher risk. And what I found, Stephen, is that people reliably got better when they got off their medicine. And it was really reliable, so that their diagnosis often disappeared in that setting. So that I really then could make the conclusion that the medicines or the treatments or the diagnoses actually perpetuated the conditions they were marketed to deal with. So I really wanted to shout that from the mountaintops, and it was almost enough for me to just drop out of medicine altogether. But instead, I eased my way into really bringing communication and connection back into my work, and started doing a little bit more of taking people off of medicine and really beginning to see people as the humans that they are, going through life with standard miseries, the standard pain. They're like, being uncomfortable in an uncomfortable world is actually makes sense. We don't blame a log for burning in a fire, and we shouldn't blame us for being uncomfortable in an uncomfortable world. So as we now approach the present time, I became the undoctor. And this is like over some iterations, but as the undoctor, I really got that undiagnosing and then unmedicating and then undoctrinating people was really what I'm called for here. That the modern medicine psychiatric industry, the modern medicine psychiatric conventional technology that's presently there doesn't do service as well as just getting people exactly where they are. As you know and I know, people just really want to be heard. More than anything, people want their voices heard. So who I am now, I'm a podcaster, and I teach people how to podcast. I teach people, I also am a keynote speaker, and I speak to the power of creativity and connection at the heart of all healing. And I mean all healing, not just psychiatric healing, all healing. And people really, really just want to be heard for who they are. But first, they got to find out who they are because they've been fractured as well. So as a podcaster, I'm assisting people with showing their very best self, becoming who they are, and then sharing it with another such that they're gotten, such that there's a willingness to really merge with each other and really get that in some ways we really are all one. And now finally I'm healing people. So finally I'm at a space where I call myself a former psychiatrist. I don't do that anymore. I don't write prescriptions because I don't have it that they make people better. And I don't diagnose either. What I really do when I'm looking at someone is really looking across at another soul that's trying to make sense out of a world that's pretty difficult to make sense of. And from there, really amazing things happen. Miraculous healing events take place.
Yeah. Well, let's go back. I want to create a distinction. I'm big on words, and again, bullseye, target, words matter.
Sure.
In your description, Fred, what's the difference? And a lot of people are confused on this. What's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist?
Well, psychiatrist, there's quite a difference. Psychiatrist goes in entirely different schooling. So I went to medical school. I went to medical school with surgeons and with, family doctors and with ophthalmologists and with pediatricians. And I went to medical school at Northwestern University. And so, we were given a training supposedly to see the body as one big item, and to see psychiatry as a subset of one's overall being. Psychologists tend to be, the level of psychology is typically a PhD, the highest level of psychology, and they're focused primarily on mind functioning only, whereas doctors, again, psychiatrists, tend to see the whole body as a whole or really see it as a function of the overall human existence. But in reality, if you really want to get down to it, the real typecast difference is that psychiatrists can prescribe medicine and psychologists don't. And that's how that really just has morphed over time.
Yeah, and that was always the distinction I would tell people. I said the psychologists work with the mind and the psychiatrist can give you medicine.
That's pretty much it, exactly. And, they no longer even, so for me, there was a difficult time in really getting that if you really wanted to talk to your patients or if you really felt like what your client might need was a conversation, well, then I'm overqualified for that. You don't come to a psychiatrist for a conversation anymore. You come to a psychiatrist so that we can mess with your biological neural pathways. And it's not at all what I thought I was getting into back in 1984 when I decided to go to medical school.
And sure. And so the medication side, again, we probably all know people such as I do, especially in LA, that have had trauma, PTSD, things like that, and will use medication as the crutch. And I've never been in that situation. Fortunately, a lot of it to me is mental, but there is some aspect of medication that would help. How do you start bridging the gap though between the medication to the mind where people can start trying to process things differently and learning skill sets to kind of move through that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And, I don't know that I can say with any kind of confirmation that the medicines actually help. That's first thing. So I've had 40,000 patients. It's enough of a sample size to at least have an educated opinion.
Yeah,
and
sure.
The educated opinion does not include necessarily that medications are helpful ultimately. An analogy I like to use is if you have a mosquito bite, and it's on your elbow, it's been there for 2 or 3 weeks, and it's just itching, and, sometimes wakes you up at night, and it gets bigger when you scratch it and all that, and you come to a doctor, and the doctor has a cure for you. He's like, yep, we got a cure for that. What's that? Well, we're going to cut off your arm at the shoulder, and everything should be fine after that. And that's pretty much what medication does, is it's a myopic way of looking at the symptoms. So the next time you would come back to that doctor, if you looked for the mosquito bite on that elbow, you would see that it wasn't there anymore, and you would think that you got the ultimate cure. In the reality, what you got is one less arm, and one less arm, it really means that, yeah, you're not going to have any mosquito bites on your elbow, but you're not going to have any other functioning of your arm either. And so that's really how these medications go. So I don't have it that there's ultimately a distinction for which medicines are a great idea. I don't have that.
And then as you transition to the undoctor side of it, what have you learned then about how to help people in those situations where medication may have numbed the pain or taking off some of the edge, but they still need a way to move forward. They still need their elbow to function.
Yeah. Yeah, so creativity. I have written a book. It's called Creativity Healing Through Creativity. I'm sorry, The Creative 8: Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. And I'll be able to offer your listeners an ebook version of that, and that'll be on. I suppose we'll be able to put that onto our presentation.
Yeah.
And you just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative8. And so what I really noticed, Stephen, is that when we're being creative, actually creative now, like actually doing the work of creativity, art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, gardening, those are the creative 8. And when we're doing those things, all our uncomfortable experiences, which we tend to call symptoms when we're looking at them from a medical perspective, tend to vanish, tend to disappear. So, while being creative, this stuff really works. Like, it's like when we're being creative, what was ailing us literally dissolves.
Yeah.
So the creative aid is a way to really get that maybe what the symptoms that were the symptoms or the discomfort, the uncomfortable, the miserable experiences that we might be having is more a function of not being self-expressed properly. We tend to focus so much on our voice like you and I are doing now. But there's so many ways to express ourselves in the unspoken or in the performing or visual arts. And in those areas, that's one of the places where we can alleviate symptoms without the use of medications. It's not a matter, the numbing or this idea, that's what the industry has taught us that these drugs do. It's just simply not necessarily what they do. And sometimes there's a razor blade that's embedded in those Band-Aids. And we don't always know that. And as a doctor who's been around this enough times, I think it's more often a razor blade than we like to pay attention to.
So let's play a hypothetical patient.
Yeah.
PTSD, trauma as a child.
Yeah.
Psychologists tend to just want to talk and listen. I have friends that have gone through this, and a lot of times I'm like, what did they ask you to do? Well, no, they listen for 2 hours, and they're so starting to develop skill sets. What kind of systems or techniques or what things are you doing now that are different than medication, but people still can take steps to get forward? Because these people want to get better. And I don't know that the medication always moves it there. And I don't know that them just talking for 2 hours to somebody helps in those situations where they need the most help.
Right. So first of all, I want to say something about this. You bring up a hypothetical case, but if you did that, you had to bring up that particular diagnosis. So PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, wasn't a disorder at all when I went through medical school. So what I'm saying about that is these disorders are contrived conversations. There was such thing as shell shock. There was such thing as, that was later morphed into PTSD. But these days, all you have to do is kind of grow up in a traumatic family and then have memories of that, and you can earn the
moniker of
PTSD, the moniker of having PTSD. And it's not PTSD, it's you. It's not PTSD. You don't. So the first thing you want to do is unglue the diagnosis from the sense of who I am.
Okay.
I don't have PTSD. I don't. I have Fred Moss. That's what I have. And I'm walking through my life being me. And so even if I have memories of trauma or repetitive memories of trauma or a concern about going anywhere near close to trauma as if it might happen again, that isn't a condition. That isn't a diagnosis. That's just something to deal with. Now, another thing you said, if you really want to look at words, and you said that, we're a stickler for words here, is you said talking to somebody. Now, What's really interesting is that talking to somebody is not going to work. Talking with somebody, that works.
Yeah.
You really got to be with somebody. Just kind of unloading on an empty receptacle of another person doesn't work. But being gotten, actually being heard for what it is that you're saying, actually having your pain resonate with another person, actually having your experience registered with another person, it is from there that all healing really, really emanates from. And I don't have it that, that's how therapies generally work. Because therapists and the whole mental health system is built on this power gradient of a doctor and a patient, with the doctor having something that the patient doesn't have, and the doctor is going to provide it for them. That power gradient is insurmountable. And the power gradient is created to create a perpetuation of a need for that particular relationship. If we really start looking at conversation being aimed at perhaps not diminishing in any way the pain of one's experience, really not. People might mishear this as to think that I'm saying it's all in your head, you don't need psychiatry, you don't need medicine. No, it is in your experience. It is as miserable as it is. It is real that it's that miserable. What's not real is that there's something wrong with you that you're having that experience. So when you start getting that there's nothing wrong with you that you're having that experience, even if you're pretty sure there's something wrong with yourself, and we're all, even you, I'll bet, but certainly I at times have thought, oh yeah, I'm different, I'm weird, there's something wrong with me. Yeah. That's part of being normal, is knowing that you're not normal. And, that's part of a regular human experience. When we start getting that we're all walking the same path of life, there's a new level of entry into being validated and being, like getting some credibility. And from there, I'm just telling you that I've seen miracle after miracle from people who otherwise hadn't been treated recently, like they mattered, or like they were 100% a person. And even just getting that, it's remarkable, the level of healing.
Yeah, it's one of these things where it's difficult for people to not take things personally and detach. And I tell people all the time, I'm not normal. However, there's no definition of normal. So right. what may be normal to me is abnormal to somebody else, but it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. They're just different.
That's right.
And they all have differences.
Exactly. And, the fact that you really know that there's no definition of normal makes the whole notion of abnormal completely absurd.
Right. Yeah. And I joke a lot. And it's not I'm not politically correct. I'm politically direct. One of my jokes about where I live in Los Angeles, I live in Beverly Hills, and I say it's different than Santa Monica and Venice. It's a different type of sea. And Santa Monica, Venice, if you've been there, it's a different class of S. I mean, it's surf and sand and shorts and sandals and people smoking and just fine. And Beverly Hills is more suits and skirts and stiletto and sushi. And not that either one's better or worse, they're different.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as you come to appreciate the fact that people are different, then there is no normal. I think it's sometimes easier for people. So another question, Fred, because again, I've read I've read hundreds of books. The audience knows that I read 367 books in 6 years in my 20s, and just really tried to consume a lot of information.
Right.
And as a male, I'm going to distinguish and defer and discriminate against myself. As a male, we tend to want to fix things. And so there's a lot of aspect of when you're dealing with somebody with PTSD or trauma, or even an emotional episode, we tend to just want to fix it. Like, well, what can I do to fix it? That lack of empathy is difficult sometimes. Do you have any skills or tips when somebody's in an emotional situation? It's tough to just, as a guy, to just be heard. I joke that sometimes it's like trying to be a girlfriend where you just tend to need to listen, but not fix things.
Yeah.
how have you resolved or handled some of those situations?
Sure. So you're kind of referencing the men are from Mars kind of notion of that being sort of a nature of a masculine personality, as if that's inherent, and it's not. But it's okay that we think it is, and I certainly can relate as a man to me wanting
That's why I
more than women.
discriminated against myself as a man by saying, "Oh, we have this," which is discriminatory to even think that.
That's right. But it's a well oiled prevailing conversation that has an agreement reality associated with it. So we'll just let it slide as if it's real. And once we do that, we start getting something, which is, I'm not asking you to just like sit with it. I'm asking you to get that if I can get your experience, like literally get it and be there with you such that you know that I got your experience. That's where healing starts. That's exactly where healing starts. And that's, most people, if you look at that person or if they look at you, let's say you have been labeled or you have been given the moniker of post-traumatic stress disorder, and now you're walking around with, I have PTSD, and that's the way it is, and therefore I'm different than you who probably doesn't have PTSD, then you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So the idea can be that you can lift that and get, I have humanity. So I am human. I'm not mentally ill. I'm human.
Yeah.
They are not mentally ill. They are human. Welcome to humanity. And Welcome to Humanity is a company that I've developed over the last 5 years. That's actually my you should say like the mother lode of the branding. And Welcome to Humanity is really getting, those moments during the day where you feel absolutely lousy. Sometimes it happens where you're like, holy cow, this sucks. This is just terrible. I feel horrible. I just feel like going to bed and pulling the covers over, or, taking a big stiff drink, or running away to nature or something.
Yeah,
You know,
for me personally, I don't have those on a daily basis because I programmed it out of my mind.
there you go.
But I've tracked over time. I have it monthly. So I've learned my time of the month, which is my biorhythms are down certain days
Mm-hmm.
where I'll have those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm aware of that. And then second, real quick, and I want you to continue your thought. I was just at an event actually the other night, and we were like, oh, you need a drink. And I looked at the bartender. I said, there's been 3 or 4 times in my life where I felt I need a drink. And those are the exact times I will never take one.
Yeah.
I'm only going to take a drink when I don't think I need it because I don't want to succumb to that. So, we all have these things at different times, but please continue.
Well, I think you make a really good point. I think most people think they get to a point where I need medicine, and that's precisely the time where you absolutely don't need medicine. What you really need is to be heard. What you really need is to sit with your vulnerability. What you really need is to sit with that sensitivity, the rawness, the pain of whatever it is that you're experiencing, whether that be fear or helplessness or despair or anxiety, or if that be memories that keep circulating, or thoughts that are going faster than you wish, or maybe you're even hearing a little voice. And if you think you're not hearing a voice, if you take a moment and see if you're hearing voices, you'll hear the voice that says, I don't have voice. I don't have voice. I mean, he might have. I don't have voice. That's the voice I'm talking about, actually. So we all do have the chatter going on all the time.
Sure.
It's like, no, I don't. Well, who do you think just said that? I mean, and so we start really looking at that being a normal variant as well. And we start being able to respect people from the ground up. So when you get to the point of, oh my God, I'm so nervous all day, one of the things you might want to look at is, what are you putting into your system? And not just through your mouth and not just through your nose, but what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you, thinking? What are you creating for yourself? Because toxicity comes in multiple flavors and really can leak in through multiple sensory organs. And one of the things about anxiety or depression is, well, more than likely you fed yourself something that is expressing itself in a negative way, in a low vibrational way. And there is an opportunity through creativity, through connection, through communication, to find oneself at least back to square one, at least back to reset, at least back to wonder and curiosity in this world
Yeah.
that, frankly, is pretty wild. It's pretty wild out there.
It's amazing. I have a sequence of books, and a lot of times people are like, "Oh, what book should I read?" And I have to say, it depends on where you are in your journey. People are at different points in their journey of discovery, and but I always tell them one of the first ones. It's a friend of mine I interviewed not too long ago named Michael Gerber,
Mm-hmm.
the E Myth. But even before that, the book is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself,
Ah, okay.
and
Uh-huh.
it's that self-programming. And I had an instance of something happened to me in New York a couple of years ago. There was a massive explosion. And I tell people, oh, I'm programmed to not think nefarious. So my mind immediately went away from bad. They go, well, what do you mean your mind's programmed?
Mm-hmm.
I said, my mind's programmed not to go, oh my God, it's a bomb. It's, oh, backfire, something. It's training that takes time. It's not something that is innate, but I do believe there are processes you can do. And like you said, it's not feeding of food, it's feeding of thought,
Mm-hmm.
and learning
Exactly.
how to change that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And this idea of resetting mindset of getting to the space of, well, you know what, I am miserable right now, or scared, or depressed, or aimless, or I'm feeling uncertain, or I'm feeling like maybe I'm crazy, or I'm just flabbergasted with what they did, or what he did, or what she did, or what I did. The once we go there, we can start getting, oh, this is also just another variant of the cornucopia of what it is to be a human being. And then from there, there's kind of, for me, when I get there, there's a little smile that creeps on my face. There's something like really getting, oh, I feel your pain. I do. I acknowledge your pain. I do. I absolutely honor and embrace your pain and my pain. I do. And welcome to humanity. Not, dude, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And so with what you're working on now, what are the primary activities and things you're working on that you can share with us?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So, one of the things I'm working on these days is this thing called the true voice podcasting, as I just mentioned. So, using the same technology that I've developed, or that's been developed over the last several, maybe a couple decades, but at least 15 years since 2006, I help people refine that which matters to them. I help people refine their stand. I help people refine what's important to them, what makes their heart sing. From their heart, from our heart, we generally have a couple or three things that really are unwavering and really do matter to us. So in this process, I help people really find that, whether it be corporations or people who are maybe have a position of power, and maybe even as a clinician, and really help them find themselves and find what's important to them, and from that really deliver into a customized platform, which I'll call a podcast. And so I help people actually design and create what's important to them in the form of podcastable material, and then the paperweight that they walk away with is the paperweight of walking away with an actual working model of, an actual high class podcast. So
And
that's one
so
thing I'm doing.
so how do we find you? How do people follow you on that? And is there a follow-up program or anything outside of or past the podcast?
Yeah, so the follow up program is a mastermind. It's in its early stages, and we're just talking about a monthly meeting, a monthly group of people who meet pretty much every week, but it's in month segments, and really using each other to make sure that the actual, genuine, authentic voice is being expressed, and that listening. And I think you know this probably more than most. The most important part of conversation isn't in what I say, it's in how you hear me. And
Small
not
mouth,
only
big
is
ears.
that's right, that's right. And my job is to listen to your listening of me and then deliver into that. My job is to actually listen for how am I being heard by you, and then adjust my speaking to meet whatever it is that you're listening me from. So that's part of the process. And as a transformational coach, as a restorative coach, I also help people really just kind of unlatch themselves from the very disempowering context of having a diagnosis or being treated as if one is afflicted or defective, and really getting that maybe you're not afflicted or defective. Maybe, just maybe, you're just being human. And there's an opportunity to really step from there into power.
Perfect. Last question as we wrap up. For the Mastermind Group, 3 questions all converging into one part. 1, what size is the group? 2, is the audience people who are wanting to transition and need help and maybe come off medication? Or is it people who are looking for like-minded support, lifestyle coaching, because they're different? Right. Or is it both?
Right. So the Mastermind Group, I'm pretty sure I'm going to limit it to the number 8. I love the number 8. This is 4 groups of 2. This gets everybody to be able to share each and every time we meet. And I think 8 is a magical number. And then, you know, with 8, I'm the 9th one. And on Zoom, of course, that creates a 3x3 matrix. So that's kind of fun too.
Yeah.
So there's something about the architecture of 8 that works for me. With respect to who's in the group, we're really looking for people who want to find their voice, people who think that their voice isn't being expressed. It's people who feel like they have a message and they haven't delivered it yet. And that can be coaches or clinicians, or it can be people who have been treated in mental health. Now, just to make it very clear, the Mastermind Group isn't about learning how to, this particular Mastermind Group isn't particularly learning about how to come off medicine or come off a diagnosis. It isn't a matter of coming off medicine or diagnosis. It's a matter of finding oneself inside of our real self and our creative self, our divine self. And that's what this group does. It's a matter of finding oneself and then finding a platform for which that which matters to me can be broadcast to the greatest and the most concentrated audience that's interested in like-minded or curious about whatever I'm exploring.
Perfect. And then last question, this will be a quick and easy one. My guess is you as the keynote cornerstone can run multiple 8-group masterminds.
Oh yeah, sure. It'd be my pleasure. I would wake up and run a mastermind all day long, and if it changed every hour, the more the better.
Good. So if I have people to send to you and it breaks the 8, then we just start another one.
Absolutely, positively. Unless there was some reason to go to 9, 10, or 12, in which case I'd be glad to do that. Nothing is cookie cutter enough, but yeah, sure.
We'll see how big the frames are on Zoom.
Sounds good. It sounds good. Thank you.
All right, Fred. Thank you so much. Dr. Fred, the Undoctor, Stephen Me, the Bullseye Guy. Tune in again next week. Thanks, everybody. Be safe.